I'm Angela from 3 Interiors. I'm an interior designer working mainly on residential.
And I'm Sian from Sorted, a declutterer and organiser for homes and offices. Now you might be wondering why an interior designer and a declutterer have come together on a video. And the main reason is that there's a lot of elements of our businesses that actually cross over. Now neither of us are professing to be the other in profession, so I am definitely not an interior designer and Angela certainly isn't a declutterer.
As you can tell.
But we've come to Angela's office to showcase some of what we do and how we do it in terms of helping you.
So January generally is a really good time to think about a declutter, clear the space, get ready for spring. So we're going to show you today some hints, tips and advice, mainly based around the fact that you want to be doing what I say, not what I do. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, basically getting your office decluttered, working smart and looking its best.
Now there's 4 specific topics that we're going to focus on today, and these are the ones that we think you really need to get to grips with before you start any project. Now that's looking at your space, looking at the tools that you're using, storage, and then finishing with the style. So things to consider when you're looking at an office space is the type of person that's going to be using it. Do they have a specific way of working? So for instance, do they like everything to be strewn about on their desk that they can just pick and find that way? Or do they like it to be neat and tidy and put in an order and put away or hidden? You also have to look at things like, physical disabilities. Are there any that's going to get in the way of the space that you're using? Do you have to consider then leading on to furniture that will manage that? And also habits. Habits can change, so the way you use the office space is really important to think about. Is there going to be, or are there going to be any major changes in the future that might change the habits that you're using and how you use that space?
Yeah, so talking about habits, really I'm a very visual person, so I can't have anything put away, otherwise I'll just forget it. This office is definitely not planned out in any way really. It's a home office, I'm a small business. Literally this was the last room on a long list of other rooms that we had to do during our renovation, and I literally went out, bought some storage, put up my cork board for all of my mood boarding for clients and started working, and that's how it stayed ever since.
So when something like that happens, you have to then sort of reassess the space and then go, okay, it was a last minute thought, we've thrown things in, can we rework the space with the furniture sometimes that's in it already, or do we need to go out and buy some new things? So you need to look at things like your plugs, where are your plugs, what else would you need to think about? Let's think.
Well, storage furniture, obviously, is there enough storage furniture? Is it going to work long term? Yeah, so the practical elements, this is also been set out for a bedroom. If we sell this house, the people that are coming in might not work from home. So they'd want to turn it into a bedroom. So, the actual plug aspect of things, for example, has been set out really quite geared towards it being a bedroom as well, which obviously doesn't necessarily work when you need it as a home office.
But you can make it work, because one way you can do that is to zone areas. So you can create zones within your space, and it doesn't have to be a large space to do this, to make it feel like it's more of an office environment. So for instance, this room is set into 2 halves almost. You've got the desk here right in front of us, which you can't quite see, corkboard to your right and some storage behind us. Behind the camera is an open space with a whiteboard and some extra possible storage for other items. Now this room is used for multiple uses. As a home office, it has personal effects for the house in here. It has obviously the office equipment and materials that Angela needs for her job. And it also gets used as an overflow space ready to go into other areas. So you need to make sure that you have that in mind, and if you zone an area well within a space, then you can make that space become an office environment, even though it's potentially also a bedroom.
Yeah, sure.
The other thing that you have to remember is that everything in that room needs to have a home. If it doesn't have a home, it shouldn't be there. If it's something that is temporarily there because it's going to a home, that's fine. But you have to keep that in mind when you're looking at your space.
So now we're going to look at the tools that you need to consider in a home office. So it's things like stationery, printers, laptops, anything that you need to do your job, and the fact that it's going to be in or on a piece of storage furniture. So think about what you're using in the room. How is it used? What do you need to make that use easier?
Yeah, so for instance, we could look at the printer, like this one here that Angela's got. You know, does it need to be out on show like it is, or is it something that's only going to be used once a week and therefore could be hidden away?
Unfortunately not. I do use it a lot, but it is quite ugly. I don't really like looking at it, but the fact that it would take up such a big space in a cupboard has deterred me from doing anything else with it.
And obviously with printers come cables and wires, as does laptops and things like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, have you thought about where those wires are going to be? Are they going to be on show? Do they need something to help tidy them up, like a cable tie, or you can get the cable ties that are the ones, the spiral ones, can't remember what they're called.
Yeah.
You know, that make it look neater and tidier. You know, other things that you need to consider are things like magazines. You know, you've got lots of magazines.
Loads of them. Unnecessary, probably. You know, I flick through them. I use tear sheets from them to get ideas for clients quite a lot, but actually this is got a bit ridiculous. I've just got a massive pile of magazines that I desperately need to go through.
But it's one thing that you need to consider. So, you know, it's something else. Other ideas and thoughts are things like, you know, for you, it's sample materials.
Yeah.
You know, where is Angela going to put them so that she's got easy access to them? And one of the last things that you really need to think about is your worktop, you know, your workspace here. How much space do you need, and realistically, you know, what do you need on it to make your life easier when you're working in your office?
And this is definitely something that I need, because I don't know if you can see the desk in much detail, but it's a mess. I'm a very messy worker, so I'm just really glad that Sian's here. Okay, so if we're talking about office storage, there's two ways of thinking about this. The first thing is the requirements of the space, and then the next thing is the kind of storage it is and how it looks. I always say it's a really good idea to measure and add 30% to what you think you need.
However, I don't 100% agree with that one, because if you are the kind of person that likes to fill space, do not add that 30%, because you will only fill it with things that don't need to be there.
For sure, definitely. You've got to keep on top of it. Don't store what you don't need, and go through it at least twice yearly.
So if we were to look at Angela's current setup, for instance, as an example, you know, the way that her desk currently is doesn't actually work properly for the way it could work.
It really doesn't.
So her desk is facing into the room, and to her right is her mood board. Now at the moment she has to turn to the right to see her mood board, and then from that she has to turn again to see any of her stationery. So if we looked at the way that the furniture is set and the way that everything is set up currently, it doesn't really work. So ideally we want to look at maybe turning the desk so that she's facing, looking at the mood board already, and then also got access to her storage here. Now that leads on to things like, you know, what storage do you have on your desk? So for instance, she doesn't have any filing systems on your desk at the moment, do you, Angela? So things like this, where it is I mean, this one's a bamboo one that I got online. The great thing about this is that you can take out the shelves to suit your needs in terms of how much information you want to put in there, and obviously put them back.
It just looks nice as well, doesn't it? It's not plastic.
No, it ties in quite nicely with your desk.
Yeah.
Which is lovely.
Yeah.
And then, you know, moving on from that, that then goes into the bigger shelving and storage here, where again you can change the levels of these shelves. So it means that you can chop and change it to suit your needs. You know, at the moment Angela doesn't have anywhere to put stationery really. She's got these little jars around the place, you know, which is great. But she needs all of her stationery in one place. Now one way of doing that, for instance, when you've got open storage like this, is using something like this. You know, you can put in a little basket, take up, put your jar in, and then you have all of your space.
Looks so much better.
Gadget that we both have, which I noticed quite recently, was this wonderful little thing
I can't
here,
wait to use mine.
which is a label maker,
Yeah.
which makes everything look lovely and
I
neat
know,
and tidy,
I'm excited.
and is a really great option for things, you know, if you're trying to neaten things up and make things look better.
Yeah, because I think really looking at the questions like, do you need a filing cabinet, etc. Do you need to see and access what you're storing? I do, because I'm a visual person, so I have to have these things out and labelled up so I know exactly what's in them, and I need to be able to access them easily. At the moment though, they're not as stylish as they could be, so I'm going to paint them all up and make them all look uniform, and then I'm going to label everything up with a nice proper label. So for me, visually, it looks nice and it's effective.
Yeah. And one of the things, really the last thing that you've got to consider when you're looking at storage is making sure that you are buying the right storage for the needs. So, you know, measure up.
Yeah, measure and measure again, and then you'll know. So if you're thinking about styling your office, you might be looking at social media, Pinterest, Instagram, etc., and seeing all these beautiful offices and thinking, mine doesn't look like that. Mine doesn't. Obviously, you can see that.
Neither does mine. Neither does mine.
So, you know, if you're a messy worker like I am, you know, chances are you're going to have to just live with the fact that your office might never look like those beautiful ones that you're seeing on Instagram. But what you want to take from those is thinking more about the purpose and practicality of your space. You need some sort of desk order.
Yes, you do. But that also ties in quite nicely to habits. Now, habits are something that you can easily make and are very difficult to break. It takes something like 3 goes or so to make a habit, and it takes something like 50 changes to break a habit. So you have to be very conscious about what you're doing when you're doing that, and that works in very nicely into office space as well. So if you find that your office space is not working for you, it could be that the habits that you've created within that space and the style that you've got already is wrong, and you need to change it. So you have to be very conscious about the fact that you're going to be changing a habit. When we look at you and the fact that you're a messy worker,
yeah,
you know, your habit of just having, say for instance, your filing thrown around on your desk,
yep,
has kind of got to change.
Let's be honest.
You can still have it on your desk, and you can still have it so that, you know, you've got piles of it, but it has to be more ordered. So to make it more streamlined for you to be able to work better. Yeah, and I think that's really important to remember.
Yeah, I think when we're thinking about functionality and style together, there's lots of things that can help, but both of them have to go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. I am going to start using this lovely labelling machine.
One of my favourite machines.
Yeah, exactly, I know, love it. And that's because the labels that I've got now don't look very nice. There's a lot of work to be done here in terms of getting everything to look better. So the labelling machine will help with that. It'll also help with other things like labelling up baskets, any sort of other filing that I do. So yeah, but it still looks good as well. It's not just a hastily scribbled handwritten tag. If we're thinking about style in terms of colour, we also have to think about the psychology of that as well. My office has barely any colour because there's so much of it that's already brought in through things that I do for clients, and my mood board that you can't see but is full of tear sheets from magazines and things like that, which obviously bring in an awful lot of pattern and colour. So I don't tend to have a colour in my office. But if you've got an office where, you know, it's a home office, you want to inject a bit of personality. If it's a dynamic space and you're a dynamic person, if you're doing a sales job, for example, you probably want to be looking at things like orange, red, that type of thing. Don't paint every wall. That will be way too much for your brain to cope with. You know, you just want splashes of it, and that might just come in through accessories, just a feature wall, that type of thing. If you want a more calming environment, you want to be looking at colours that have maybe, you know, a grey tone background to them, possibly like a sage grey, that type of thing, maybe a pastel, something that just doesn't feel too shouty and can give you that calming experience when you're in your office.
And then when you focused on the colour, then you can look at things like the aesthetical things that might look better within that space.
Yeah, of course.
So for instance, looking at, you know, baskets and things that you can use, you can get these kind of baskets here, you know, that from pretty much most supermarkets now, and they come in a variety of different sizes, and they can just, you know, sit and look pretty on a shelf, or make a space look more uniformed when you've got them next to each other. You know, if you've got different spaces that you're working with, perhaps you have to have still things available and accessible, but you need to make them look a bit more uniformed. And this is one way that you can do that. And it's affordable. You know, you don't have to spend the earth on this. It's something that you can do, that you can chop and change as you need to. So once you start to use the space better, then you start to assess and maybe reassess the smaller storage units that you're using. So don't go out and splash, you know, massive amounts of cash on storage that maybe you're going to change in a couple of months' time.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely worth mentioning that you don't have to spend lots of money. I'm very much that kind of high-low. Behind me are Billy bookcases from IKEA. They're absolutely brilliant. From a storage point of view, they were exactly what I needed, but they were not expensive at all. My desk is actually a dining table that, yeah, did cost a little bit more money. I sort of, you know, splurged on that a little bit more because it was kind of a nicer piece. But you can buy storage for a home office really quite cheaply. Yeah.
And you also need to make sure that you are zoning those spaces as well.
Yes.
So, and a way of zoning them is to have some element of uniformity. So some way of tying everything in that makes it look good. But remember, really one of the most important things that you do have to remember is that it's a working space and it has to work for you.
So let's recap. We've touched on the 4 elements, and that's space, tools, storage and style. Hopefully these will give you some hints and tips that you can take and use in your own home office.
And if you're interested in looking at decluttering or interior design for your home in more detail, then please do get in touch. Our contact details will be at the end of this video.
And we're also currently considering collaborating and hosting some workshops. It's very exciting. They will be based on decluttering and styling, obviously in your own home. So do let us know if this is something that would be of interest.
And we'd also really like to see pictures of your own office revamps. So please do send them to our Facebook pages. Again, our contact details will be at the end of this video. So from Angela and I, thank you very much for watching, and we hope to hear from you soon. Bye.
Bye.